Welcome back, everyone. The Hidden Queen, the true story of Susan Pevensie, Chapter 3, Nylons and Lipstick. The girl in the mirror was perfect. Susan tilted her head, checking every detail. Hat at exactly the right angle, stocking seams perfectly straight, victory red lipstick applied with precision, everything exactly right. She smiled at her reflection. The reflection, yeah, it smiled back. Neither smile reached their eyes. "Susan, darling," Caroline's voice floated up from downstairs. "Everyone's already at the Savoy. We'll be terribly late." "Coming," Susan called back. One more glance in the mirror. One more small adjustment. One more deep breath, like a diver preparing to go under. Then down the stairs. London, 1950. The war was over. The city was rebuilding itself into something entirely new, something glamorous and hopeful, and determinedly modern. The bomb sites remained, of course. You couldn't miss those empty spaces where buildings used to stand, like missing teeth in a smile. But around them, and between them, and sometimes right on top of them, the new London, well, it was rising. Jazz clubs and cocktail bars, fashion and parties, the future arriving fast. And Susan Pevensie, 22 years old, had made herself into exactly the sort of girl the new London wanted. Beautiful, everyone said so. Not pretty in that soft, childish way. Beautiful in a sharp, sophisticated way that made men look twice and made women study her carefully, trying to determine what exactly made her so striking. She wore the right clothes, knew the right people, laughed at the right jokes, danced to the right music, said the right things in exactly the right tone that made everyone around her feel clever and charming. She was perfect, and she was completely, utterly empty. "Susan, there you are!" Caroline swept her into the Savoy ballroom with characteristic enthusiasm. "Come on, darling, meet Douglas. He's just back from Oxford and absolutely dying to meet you. He says he saw you at the Hendersons' party and hasn't stopped talking about you since." Douglas was tall, blonde, precisely the sort of young man who would be studying at Oxford. He had a good smile and better manners, and absolutely no idea what to do with Susan's perfection. "Miss Pevensie," he said, taking her hand with practiced gallantry, "I am so pleased to finally meet you properly. Caroline tells me you're at university as well." "Just finished my second year," Susan said, deploying her practiced smile. Warm, but not too warm. Interested, but not eager. "English literature. How marvellous. Have you read the new Eliot? I find it quite revolutionary in its approach to..." Susan stopped listening. Not intentionally, not deliberately. She just found herself somewhere else. Not thinking of something else exactly, more like sensing something. As if there were a conversation happening just outside her range of hearing. And if she could only turn her head at exactly the right angle, she'd catch it. A feeling of wrongness, of missing something, of being in the wrong place entirely. "Miss Pevensie?" Susan snapped back. Douglas was looking at her with concern. "I'm so sorry," she said smoothly, her smile never wavering. I thought I heard. Never mind, you were saying about Eliot." But the moment had been too long. Douglas's interest had already started to cool. He made polite excuses within minutes, and then he moved on to Caroline, who was less beautiful but more present and somehow more accessible. Susan didn't mind. She'd had this exact conversation 100 times with 100 different Douglases. Literature, poetry, music, politics. The same topics arranged in slightly different orders, like a deck of cards being endlessly reshuffled. Nothing ever felt new. Nothing ever felt real. She drifted to the balcony, champagne glass in hand, and looked out over nighttime London. Lights glittering, people laughing, music drifting through open windows, the whole city alive and bright and reaching for something better. And Susan felt like she was watching it all from behind glass. Somewhere out there, Peter was at Cambridge being brilliant. Edmund was considering law school. Lucy was still at home with mother, but writing letters about coming to London next year, about adventures, about finally living. Lucy still mentioned Narnia sometimes in her letters, casual references that Susan never responded to, just let slide past like she hadn't noticed them. Because what was there really to say? I'm glad you remember something I can't. I'm happy you have something that was taken from only me. No, better to say nothing. And Susan was here at parties, wearing the right dress, saying the right things, being perfect, being empty. Penny for your thoughts. She turned. A man she didn't recognize stood beside her, older than the usual party crowd, maybe 30, rumpled suit that suggested he wasn't trying quite as hard as everyone else. They're not worth a penny, Susan said automatically. Ah, but that's for me to judge, isn't it? He smiled. James Morrison, friend of Caroline's brother. You're Susan Pevensie. You say that like you already know me. I know of you. He leaned against the balcony rail. The beautiful, mysterious Susan, who everyone talks about, but no one really knows. Want to know what I've heard? I'm not sure I do. They say you're perfect, flawless, never a hair out of place, never a wrong word, never an awkward moment. His voice was kind, not mocking, like a character from a book, beautiful, but not quite real. Susan should have been offended, should have delivered one of her practiced, cutting responses and walked away. Instead, she laughed, a real laugh, not a party laugh. That's rather rude, Mr. Morrison. Yes, he agreed cheerfully, but is it actually wrong? She looked at him more carefully. Who are you really? Just someone who's been to too many of these parties, he said. Someone who's seen too many perfect people. And I've learned something. The most perfect ones, well, they're usually the saddest. His voice gentled. What are you running from, Susan Pevensie? The question landed like a physical blow. Susan gripped her champagne glass. Tight, really tight. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. He wasn't pushing, just observing. You've built this elaborate performance. The clothes, the manner, the perfect responses to everything. But it's exhausting, isn't it? And you look very, very tired. Susan opened her mouth to deliver a cutting response, some perfect put down that would send him away stinging. What came out instead was, there's a hole. She stopped, horrified at herself. She'd never said that out loud before, not to anyone. But James waited, not filling the silence, and somehow that made it impossible not to continue. Inside me, Susan continued, a hole inside me, the words spilling out before she could stop them, where something used to be, something important, and I don't know what it was, and I don't know how to fill it. So I just keep building around it. She gestured at herself. The perfect dress, the perfect hair, the perfect facade. I keep creating this person who's so perfect and polished that no one looks close enough to see the empty space at the center. She stopped, horrified. She'd never admitted that to anyone, hadn't even fully admitted it to herself. What was it? James asked softly. The thing you lost. I don't remember, Susan whispered. That's the worst part. I don't even remember what I'm missing. I just know that once, maybe when I was young, maybe in a dream, I had something beautiful, and now it's gone. My siblings, Susan started again. My siblings talk sometimes about things from when we were children, adventures they remember, games we played. They remember it all so clearly, so vividly. And you don't? No, it's like they're describing someone else's childhood, someone else's life. She laughed bitterly. They think I've just grown up, moved on, become too sophisticated to care about childish things. But that's not it. No, Susan's voice broke. I didn't outgrow it. I lost it, and I don't know why it's missing. I don't know what's wrong with me. James's insight was gentle. Maybe nothing's wrong with you. Maybe you lost something, and instead of grieving it, which would hurt too much, you built something else, something shiny and perfect to cover the loss. Susan looked at him, really looked at him. Everyone tells me to grow up, she said. Stop living in the past. Stop clinging to childish things. So I did. I put it all away, put on lipstick and nylons and learned to be exactly what everyone wanted me to be. And are you happy? Susan really looked at him then. He wasn't mocking. He wasn't judging, just asking. Actually wanting to know. No, she whispered. I don't think I've been happy since I was 14 years old. She left the party early, made excuses about an early morning, kissed Caroline's cheek. She ignored Douglas's obvious disappointment. The night air was cold. London stretched around her, all lights and noise and people hurrying towards their lives. Susan walked slowly, in no hurry to get home to her empty flat. She thought about James Morrison's question. What are you running from? From this she realised, from the fact that her siblings had something she didn't. From the terrible knowledge that something precious had been taken from only her. From the gap between who she was and who they remembered her being. She remembered the last time Lucy had visited. 2 months ago, Lucy in London for the weekend. Sitting in Susan's flat with tea and with hopeful eyes. Susan, do you ever think about when we were young? The adventures we had? Susan had looked at her sister, seen the desperate hope, the need for Susan to remember, to share this thing that was so precious to Lucy. Lou, we're not children anymore. We have real lives now, real futures. But don't you ever miss what? Susan had said, more sharply than she intended. Miss being a child? Miss make-believe? We grew up, Lucy. That's what people do. Lucy's face had crumpled for a moment before smoothing into acceptance. Right, she said. Of course, silly of me. They spent the rest of the weekend talking about normal things. University, mother, the weather, anything but the thing that hung between them. The thing Lucy remembered and Susan didn't. Susan had been relieved when Lucy left. Relieved not to see that hope in her sister's eyes. Relieved not to feel like a broken thing that couldn't be fixed. At home, Susan stood in front of the mirror and slowly removed her armour. Hat, gloves, carefully pinned hair, perfect makeup. Piece by piece, the facade came off. Underneath was just a girl, 22 years old, lost. What happened to me? She asked her reflection. Her reflection had no answer. Susan pulled out the old journal, the one from when she was 16, 17, the one she'd put away years ago and rarely opened now. She read a few pages. I know there was a lion. Lucy says she remembers perfectly. I can't even remember. Why only me? Why can they all remember and I can't? The entries broke her heart. That girl had been so desperate, so convinced she could fight her way back to something that was already lost. Susan had learned better. Some things, once lost, stay lost. Some holes just couldn't be filled. Some people remembered things you didn't, and you just had to live with that. The lipstick and the nylons and the perfect performance. They weren't shallowness. They were survival. They were the only way Susan knew how to be in a world where she was missing something everyone else had. I'm not interested in nylons and lipstick, Susan whispered to her reflection. I'm interested in not feeling broken, and this is the only way I know how. She closed the journal, put it back in the drawer. Tomorrow she'd get up and put on the armour again, go to her lectures, meet Caroline, be perfect. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself cry for something she couldn't remember, for someone she used to be, for the siblings who still remembered everything and the gap that had grown between them. For a girl who believed in impossible things and had somehow lost the ability to believe in anything at all. Outside her window, London slept, and Susan Pevensie, beautiful, sophisticated, perfect Susan Pevensie, lay in the dark and felt the hole inside her grow wider. The hole her siblings had never had to face. The hole she'd learned to build around. The hole that lipstick and nylons and performances could never cover, never fill. She didn't know it yet, but this emptiness was about to change shape, to take on a different form. Because within the year, she would meet a man named Robert at a university function, and within 2 years, she would be married. Within 3 years, she would be a mother. And within 4 years, she would be a writer, still searching, still aching, still trying desperately to fill that hole that couldn't be filled. Not with lipstick, not with perfection, not with anything else she could find in this world. Thank you. Next, chapter 4.